Today I interviewed Thena Johnstone, who I had the great pleasure of working with last year when she completed the Relaunch Your Career program. Thena has had a diverse career journey, commencing in senior sales positions in pharmaceutical and wine, running her own successful property services business for 6 years, and more recently transitioning into the aged care industry. I invited Thena on the program to share her journey with you and to provide some insights into this growth industry. I hope you enjoy her story. Welcome to the Relaunch Your Career podcast. I am your host, Leah Lambert, career and interview coach and founder of Relaunch Me, where we help you find the work that you were meant to do. Hi, Thena. How are you today? Thank you for joining me on the podcast.
Hi, Leah. It's a pleasure. Thank you.
So, Thena, you're currently working in aged care and working in a service and operations care consultant role. And I believe you've been in aged care for about 3 years. So I guess I'm really interested in talking to you because I think your career journey will be of great interest to many listeners, particularly some people who are perhaps thinking about a career change into this area. But I'm kind of interested in you going back and explaining where you started your career, because it was in a very different area to aged care.
Very true. My first role out of high school was the age classifieds in customer service. So naturally, I excelled. It was a customer service role, sales. I naturally built on that, then was promoted into a sales role. And really, I continually moved forward into humanistic or people types of roles. So from customer service, then it was my first pharmaceutical role was a sales rep. I wanted to be on the road, a sales rep. So I progressed from over the phone, then into a sales position on the road. So that personal development from on the phone, then face-to-face. I was fortunate enough to have great mentors and great leaders particularly the pharmaceutical industry. That's really the foundation of my career. I think it was my first month we had a conference in Hawaii.
Wow.
So, I stepped into a company that was already, financially succeeding, doing well. And back then conferences were international, as well as mid-year they might have been at the Werribee Zoo in Melbourne. So it was a great industry to be in. But I think importantly, the money spent on training in pharmaceutical, teamwork. On our conference in Hawaii when I first started, it's so memorable. It was all about teamwork. It was all about people. And I think I thrive in positions where I'm working with people. So in terms of, I can work successfully isolated or by myself, but then as we're going through COVID right now, I think I mentioned to you before, it's like just having that people contact. It's really important to me. So that's where I've really excelled in the people roles.
And so can I ask you about just in pharmaceutical sales, were you out on the road selling to GPs, or what was sort of products were you selling?
So I was in the pharmacy division. So we had a team, we had a national team, but in the state Vic team, I was in a team of men. So that was interesting. It was quite, even early in those earlier days, that's 20 years ago now, it was a male-dominated field at that time, but I was there for 3 years. So then you saw the dynamics change into more female roles. But I was primary pharmaceutical on the side of pharmacy. So I was over-the-counter medications, things like you probably know, Masindol, Recticidal, that was for hemorrhoids, but also great for the eyes as well, for wrinkles. We sort of got a double selling.
We might need some more of that after the next couple of months.
I think so, I know. So, yes, the pharmaceutical side, that was more the pharmacy channel, but we would leverage, we would team. So we'd work also with the GP representatives, because obviously that's how you found out what GPs were prescribing in the pharmacy channel. So if a GP rep needed to know if they were being successful with a doctor, they would then come in and we'd work together. So I think I learned also from that pharmaceutical background foundations that departments are interdependent. Successful companies work on interdependent partners, departments as opposed to different separate silos. And I think I learnt fundamental principles when I was young.
It's interesting, yes. And I mean, often people say to me, is there a course that I can do to get into sales? And a lot of these big companies often, I think these days, do require a degree, but you learn everything on the job, don't you? And that's why these sort of pharmaceutical companies are such great places to start your career in sales because of that excellent training.
If I compare the training in pharmaceuticals to other industries I've learnt in, the budget's not there. They don't develop the career progression and development. Really is a real focus in pharmaceutical. And I was lucky. I didn't actually have a degree at the time, but I think it was a year afterwards. Then it was a cut-off where you needed to have a degree to be employed by Aventus. So I actually didn't have a degree, but I just got in time. So once again, it also, I think career can be a part of luck as well.
Yeah. Oh, and a good personality, Thena.
Yeah. That helps.
And then you spent a little bit longer in sales, I think, working in cosmetics and then in wine, which is obviously an interesting product to sell. How different was it working in wine to working in pharmaceuticals?
To be honest, I don't find it any different. You're really, you're looking at statistics, you're looking at market trends. So strategically, it's the business principles are the same, but obviously it's a people dynamics too. So for me, it wasn't a huge, obviously the product was different. You got to do a lot more samples in wine. Quite a few business trips to Margaret River and Perth. Things I notice is definitely a different business culture from your East Coast to your West Coast. West Coast is very laid back. And then East Coast, when you think of all your head office, Coles, Dan Murphy's, Woolworths, everything's bang, bang, bang. We want it yesterday. Deadlines, timelines, whereas the wine area would be a lot more laid back.
What were from your time working in sales, what were some of the real key skills that you developed during that time that you've, been able to take into other roles since then?
I think a lot of it is that building of experience. I never forget, when I first started in pharmaceutical, I was young. I was always an extrovert, but you start to look at things on a different level. So here I was, for example, my first conference, I thought I'm an extrovert, and then I go into a room with another 300 extroverts. It brings a whole new meaning of the level of extrovertism. So your perspectives deepen and change, and as you get older, you get wiser. For example, you get tested as a young representative in pharmaceutical. I had one pharmacist, he was testing me, and he'd always make it really hard. And then one time I took him, back then we had football tickets, Geelong, and seeing a pharmacist very, strict, business orientated, then seeing him at the football, an absolute madman. And then he admitted to me, he goes, I'm just testing you. So the whole time here I was so nervous going in, he kept me on my toes, and it was just a game to play. And then I'm like, oh, okay. So sometimes it's important to lighten up and just not always put that person on the pedestal as you do when you're younger, and you sort of, as you develop, you learn. I still get stage fright if I talk to a celebrity,
Yeah, and I imagine that would have been one of the more challenging aspects, was building relationships with people who perhaps didn't really want to build a relationship with you.
Absolutely. Here I am, a 25-year-old, trying to do business with, a mature man in his 50s, with a lot of experience, and he's thinking, well, what do you know? You're 25. Yeah. And if I compare my business knowledge now to when I was 25, leaps and bounds.
What aspects of sales didn't you enjoy?
Sometimes the KPIs when they're unrealistic. The part of sales particularly when management don't acknowledge with the frontline staff, strategies aren't working. And they will just keep hammering in the same old story. And it's like, well, hang on, it's not working. So if management don't realise you need to strategically change things, you can't. So I think it's very different working for organisations who can change strategies. And it is harder for larger organisations to smaller organisations. Like for myself, if I ran my own business, we can change a strategy quickly. I don't need approvals. I don't need to go through anyone. It's like, this is not working, let's change it. Whereas with big companies, no, you need approvals. So, yeah.
And so, Thena, was it some of those frustrations that led you to then set up your own business?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Tell us a little bit about the business that you established and ran for 6 years.
So with Velocity Property Services, I've always, from when I was younger in my teens, I always had this premonition, like I want my own business one day. One day. Didn't know what it would be. I've always liked business and sales and people, but I didn't have like a defined, people know if they're tech orientated, they know they're going down that path. So I guess in a way, subconsciously, it was about service. So Velocity Property Services was a total trade network for facilities management and real estate, residential, commercial. We had contractors for anything, you name it, we did it. 24/7 emergency services, essential services. So essentially, it was about service. So that's what connected me and a friend, and we just basically started it up together with, a small base, and then we both jumped into it and grew the business. And it was very challenging because once again we found ourselves females in a male-dominated industry with contractors. So I've found myself in that predicament a few times.
And so obviously you had the sales background. What sort of background did your partner, did your partner's background complement some of your skills?
Absolutely. She had that operational background and more the administrative side, where I had more the marketing and sales.
It's important to get that combination correct, isn't it? And so you just started small and then built it up over the 6 years.
Yep.
What did you enjoy most about running your own business?
Oh, I'd have to say the flexibility. The flexibility. I mean, you work hard, often it was 7 days a week, but you could, log in, log out whenever you wanted. We did do 24/7 services, so it was long hours, but we had perks where we went on often, on our conferences down the Great Ocean Road. So, our locations where we worked mobile, we took advantage of that mobile office. Which really what a lot of people are doing today in COVID. So, but also we chose in business, sometimes if we didn't like, if the client wasn't appropriate for us, we learned to say no to business, so it's balancing. It's a reciprocal relationship. So really important. We agreed on that. So as business partners, we were not just business partners, we were friends, and we still are today. So.
Yeah, that is a good news story. But it's so important, isn't it, that I think when you first start your business, you tend to say yes to everything.
Yes.
But over time you start to realise that, there's certain, services that you have perhaps offered that don't energize you, that you don't enjoy doing, and you start to be a little bit more selective and perhaps refer that on to someone else.
Absolutely. I think it was at first, you're correct. It was yes, because you're growing the business, it's more referrals, but then if it's not beneficial, it's okay to say no. And learning to say no, I think that was a challenge too.
Yeah. And what were some of the other challenges that you faced running your own business?
I think the biggest part is cash flow for a small business, and while you're trying to grow it. I mean, you could have an amazing month, and we had terms with our contractors. We're paying them in 30 days, but often clients would not pay in 30 days. So you do have that cash flow can really make or break. Can be challenging and stressful times. That's where I think I went grey sometimes. Because as you're running your own business, your IT, your accounts, your customer service, your sales, your conflict manager, you're putting multiple hats on. So it's challenging, but rewarding at the same time too.
And so did you have staff in the office doing some of those functions, or were you sharing a lot of that workload between you?
No, absolutely sharing. From the start, you're doing a lot yourself. And as we developed, we had account managers. So it was really growing and leading them to build and develop them to understand the industry.
And so whilst you're in your business, were some of your clients in the aged care space? Is that how you came to be interested in your current field?
No, actually, quite the opposite. Wasn't, and that's where I think I was wanting a different challenge and looking at, 6 years, and then I'm like, okay, what am I going to do next? Do we remain and develop this? Because I've always been from that. I like a challenge and I like to grow and see a vision. So when I get to a stage I'm not learning anymore, um, I'm I'm one of those people who has a career profile. I've changed multiple industries. I learn quickly. I actually like change. So for me, the choice was, look, I started studying social work, and that I thought, because I loved helping people, even Velocity Property Services, helping tenants, helping businesses, essential services, emergency services, that sort of side. I'm driven by help, that inner core. I like to help people, even business. My motto is, you don't see even business as sales. The sales is, how can you help that person? So I have a shift in the way I look at it. It's not about the sales. It's not about the result. It's about, if you're delivering or giving the person what they need, it's a mutual exchange.
Mm.
So I think if your perspective resonates from that intention, you're in a different headspace.
That's right. And so how did your interest in aged care come about, Thena?
Um, well, I moved to Cairns. I took a leap year. Mum wasn't well. I spent some time with her and I started to study social work. And while I was studying social work, I did some voluntary work in the local community centre and the aged care homes. And I just really get along well with the oldies. They just got stories and their characters, and it really resonated. I like the space. And once again, that side of helping people. And then for me, I thought, oh, well, what about aged care? And then I like business. So for me, I'm marrying my two strengths, my desire to help people and then my love of business, because I've got quite a unique side, because I still love to grow. I'm still achievement orientated, that I like that growth and helping and progression, yet I've got that nurturing side. So I've got sort of two polar opposites.
And that's a really interesting point you make, because I have this conversation a lot with people who I classify them as helpers. They want to make a positive contribution to society. They want meaningful work that resonates with them. But it doesn't mean that everyone has to go out and be a counsellor or a teacher or a nurse. So I often explain that there is that helping type of role, which is at the front line. So where you are working one-on-one with people, counselling, coaching, providing healthcare advice. But then there's work like what you do, which is behind the scenes operational work. But you're working for an organisation or an industry that is contributing to society. So you still feel like you're doing purposeful work, even though you're not sort of at the front line helping people on a day-to-day basis.
Absolutely. I see myself on the intersection, because I'm doing the referrals, the operations. So it's quite exactly where I am at the moment, is that perfect blend, So I've got that helping side and that strategic side.
And so even though, your role, even though it's operations, it still, I imagine, requires a lot of empathy and compassion, and in terms of dealing with people, even though it's an operational role.
Absolutely. You're liaising with clients, it's their families, and it's very different. I look at it from, you've got your clients, but you're dealing with the public. So you're not dealing with always the rationale. You've got that psychosocial side where the dynamics are very different to what you would in a professional realm. A professional realm, we have certain etiquettes and it's fine. Whereas that emotional side or that psychosocial side, you're dealing with humans, you're dealing with emotions, you're dealing with care. So it's a very, physically and mentally involved role too. It's not, very two different worlds, but when you bring them together, you need both.
Can I just take you back when you mentioned that you were doing some volunteer work whilst you were studying the Bachelor of Social Work?
Mm.
Can I ask, was the volunteering a strategic decision in order to sort of test out the area, or did it just sort of, you fell into that volunteer role and decided that you liked aged care?
No, absolutely strategic. I thought if I'm going to, because there, even with the social work side, there's a working with young children, there's aged care, so you've got different disability. And for myself, I thought, no, if I want to change into aged care, if I was going to strategically move back to Melbourne, and I thought, what's going to be my career direction? So I was really at a crossroads. Do I stay studying social work and be a social worker? At the time, I'm like, oh, I want to work in hospitals. And then I realised, well, I'm not going to get the fulfilment of the business side. But that's where definitely the voluntary work was strategic in a sense. Let's see how I feel within the environment, the types of centres, what sort of scopes, what sorts of environments. So obviously aged care, there's voluntary, there's community centres. So there's a few different spaces. So I just wanted to get a feel, but it just resonated. It sort of felt, and also being a growth industry, that was also strategic as well, because I'm 45 now. At the time, I was 42 when I decided to get that first role.
Yeah, and look, I think, that was such a great decision, that you did take that that action to go and find that work, because not only you experience the environment firsthand, but also find connections and build connections in that industry.
Mm.
How would people, if people were interested in volunteering, how would you suggest they go about it?
I think it's always great to look locally, because then if it's not too much of an effort so strategically it's local, it's 10, 15 minutes or something that's not too much of an effort for you. So go in, call in, or even with myself, facilities, it was local ones I was popping into, getting to know people, the relationships as well. So that helps in terms of definitely opening up those doors.
Yeah, and I mean, I know there's obviously volunteer job websites and job boards.
Mm.
Or would you encourage people to actually approach aged care facilities directly if they were interested in doing some volunteer work?
Absolutely. Aged care, community groups, in-home care, councils, a lot of your local councils have voluntary or work. There's a lot of organisations that need help too, particularly at this time now. There's a lot of people in aged care who are waiting for a home care package. There's thousands of people waiting. So there's definitely a lot of scope for volunteer work. And I sort of believe in a natural progression. If you're drawn or you go somewhere, it sort of tends to be fate. You find one thing leads to another, or and that's how you meet people. And then you might not be at that facility, but they'll put you in contact with someone at the local council. They're looking for people. So as soon as you take that first step, then quite often the rest then just falls into place.
Mm. I mean, usually there's quite a lot of fear that's, goes along with making a significant career change like you did, Thena.
Mm.
Do you think the volunteer work helped reduce that fear?
Absolutely, yeah. I think it's also, I'm not afraid of change or risk, but it's also you want to be sensible in making how do you feel you're making the right decision? What sort of processes are you going to put in place for yourself to, gauge that, it feels right, it's so for some people it might not be the right time in their career, because financially I did take, I took a few steps back financially to enter a new career, and someone might not be able to do that financially. So it depends, so there's other factors as well. But
And so how did you go about getting your very first role in the industry?
Well, interesting enough, I was applying for a lot of admission roles in the sales sort of side, but I didn't have experience. So at the time, I wasn't even getting interviews. So that's when I went into sort of a coordinator manager role at a residential site. I met an amazing manager, and she saw my potential. I was overqualified for the role. I've had my own business. I've been general manager, but I said I want to change careers. And she said, well, Regis is a company for that. It's a large company. You've got room to move and grow. And from that initial first interview, then getting to know her, she was a coach, a mentor. Amazing leader. I'm still in contact with her today. So I was fortunate to have someone recognise my gifts, my talents, to give me an opportunity. And I'd encourage people to don't give up. You've got to meet that right person who sees your qualities.
Great advice. And it's about, it's about articulating the transferable skills, isn't it? If you don't have the industry experience, it's focusing on the skills that you have that you can bring to the role.
Absolutely, that it's transferable. And I think my biggest thing, I mean, also now being an active member with LinkedIn, a lot of the LinkedIn learnings, there was one of them, she talked about a career profile. And I mean, myself, I'm X generation. I've worked through multiple industries. So that adaptability to change, I think that's the X generation compared to my parents' generation. They worked 20 years in one role. Whereas, I mean, I could easily change industries from aged care, so I don't know. But, we do adapt, and we do change industries. It's more common today.
Much more common. And I think there's, our parents just were satisfied if they had a job, as long as they had an income. There's a lot more focus now on finding meaningful and fulfilling and purposeful work, where our parents wouldn't have even known what that meant. There was no sort of, they just worked to do things in their life, and they had fulfillment in other areas, didn't they?
Absolutely. It's also the social organisation space. If you look at how many non-for-profit organisations there are working for Back Care now, I work with a lot of amazing people. These people are there because that's their purpose. They want to work for that social civil organisation to feel they're contributing. So that career awareness, that space now, people want to be fulfilled. It's becoming more of an expectation. And if companies aren't getting on board to that, there is a shift. And I think moving forward with this, even with in the technological space now, us working from home, you need to trust people to work from home. That wouldn't happen back in the hierarchy, that authoritarian.
No way. And so, I mean, Thena, when people think of aged care, like I do find that often I might, suggest aged care to people as an industry. And I think a lot of people, when they think of the industry, they just think of clinical roles where you are, more personal care work and caring for, or nursing. Can you tell us a little bit about some of the different roles that go on behind the scenes in aged care that would be suitable for a potential career changer to look at, that are not necessarily the clinical side?
So with aged care, it's a business. So you've actually got three types of business in aged care. You've got your residential aged care, which is the acronym RAC. Then you've got your in-home care. So that's when we're sending carers to the home. Then you've got retirement villages, retirement companies, or even retirement businesses or aged care businesses. So it starts from reception work. If someone's younger, they want to get into reception work, coordinating care, customer service roles. There's admissions in terms of residential aged care, where you're looking after the families, you're helping them through the transition from home to aged care because the family can no longer look after them. That was my second role at the space I entered. So you really, it's a humanistic. It's a if you really love working with people, aged care is a really rewarding industry.
And then I guess you've got marketing, you've got
exec roles, regional roles, your sales, marketing, even your accounts. So from, if you're an account, the accounts type of person, you want to work in that industry. So if you just think of businesses, whatever role within the same business, it will be in aged care too, in terms of that traditional structure.
So there are plenty of roles for people who don't necessarily want to go out and change career altogether and become a helper or nurse or something like that. But there's roles where people could work in finance or marketing, but still within an industry that they feel is making a positive difference.
Absolutely, because as you said before, the skills are transferable. And a lot of the time, with the learning within the industry, new people bring in new insights. And I think that's where, bringing people over from other industries is an asset. But
Mm.
also with traditional, a lot of your traditional roles, you're within an organisation that you are helping people. So it resonates in that space too. You don't have to be on the front line helping people.
So, I know that TAFE offers courses, a certificate in aged care for people who want to do more, sort of be an aged care worker, which is more the caring side. Are there any courses that you would recommend, or courses that people would do to, say, work at an admissions role or in more of the operational type roles?
There is there's a lot of courses. It depends if you want to focus on the business side, or some people might want to look at the clinical or the health management side too. Because they're the options I was looking at. Do I do MBA or do I go down the health, the clinical side? So it really depends on your experience and where you see your value and purpose, what you enjoy. But I do see in the space for aged care, both the clinical and the commercial business side and the health side, it's an integration.
Hmm.
And there's definitely, it's a growing industry. So in terms of if you're starting off on a certificate, if you want, starting off, I've known nurses who are ENs and then gone off, and doing the commercial side, or vice versa. You've got commercial people then going off doing, a nursing qualification. So it really depends. For myself, I'm more the communicator, the interactor. I could not be a nurse. I would probably faint giving someone a needle. I just could. That's not me. So I think you need to look at, what are your skills, what are your strengths, weaknesses, traits, and what you enjoy.
Exactly. And you're studying your MBA now, Thena.
Mhm.
Tell us a little bit about what you're getting out of the course and whether you're enjoying that.
Oh, well, Leah, if it wasn't for you, I wouldn't have gone on that journey through after doing the Relaunch career program. It's connecting me to learning and a lot of interesting people internationally. I've chosen to go through Australian Institute of Business. So it's learning delivered for people in the workforce. You're working full time. So with your MBA, it's 15 to 20 hours per week studying. But I thrive in learning, and I thrive in, as I said, that context of meeting and, meeting new people and the environment. So the learning curve it's been huge, and I can definitely see the reason when I come to you was struggling, coming from being managing my own company or senior roles into sort of entering at a lower level, finding that challenge to get a senior role. So for me, that learning and that integration, it's about having that experience and keep learning and keep applying for those roles. So my main objective is for that senior leadership role within aged care. But it's the industry at the moment is going through a lot of change.
Mm.
So my challenge within the industry is they're consistently wanting clinical leaders in senior commercial roles, yet they don't always have the commercial business experience. So I see, and I've spoken to many leaders, we see that changing, but it's in transition. So my goal is to keep persisting and learning and see if I stay in the home care space. Do I go back into residential aged care? Do I go and experience retirement village sector? So, but I'm open to opportunities, and I think that will come along. Yeah.
How important is networking in this industry?
Oh, absolutely important. Since connecting on LinkedIn, I really wasn't utilising LinkedIn. When you've got me, I mean, now connecting with people has been an absolute joy and pleasure, and getting industry experts experience. Also connecting with other inspirational leaders. There's a lot of inspirational leadership out there. And before I connected on LinkedIn, I was just like, you're only connecting with people in your professional field. Whereas LinkedIn opened up a full world for me, and also LinkedIn Learning. It was thrilling. It really has been a great experience. And I hope I've been networking. I hope that will bring other opportunities. I will persist.
I'll keep an eye on you then. What are some of the other challenges facing the aged care industry at present?
The aged care industry, since the Royal Commission, it's really, and speaking to, I mean, on LinkedIn, other CEOs and senior leaders, it's the over documentation. We're living in a fearful industry. People are scared if something happens, there's another report or there's a coronary, you know, there's so much fear. So you've just got over documentation, and this is where leaders are they don't understand the pressure they're putting on the frontline staff. You know, the amount of admin in these, and I've worked in various roles in aged care now, from residential and home care. So I can confidently say I don't think leaders are connecting to the processes in terms of what the frontline staff have to deal with over documentation. The systems are quite archaic. We don't have cloud-based systems. We're dealing with Citrix. We're dealing with old technology, and it's slow, and it's taking more time, and it takes away time from the clients. We should be able to spend more time with the client as opposed to, 2 hours of admin. So, for example, an assessment with a client might be, 2 hours or 1.5 hours. Yeah, it could be 4 to 5 hours of admin work.
Wow.
The ratio, like, how do you make that more efficient? This is where I hope leaders in the future will look at maximising helping the frontline staff. So that's where make their job easier, and then that will flow through the rest of the business.
Interesting.
That's, I think, is a big challenge within the industry because it's fear-based at the moment. And the biggest growth, I think, is in-home care, because people don't want to go into aged care. The resistance is huge, and you don't blame them. You'd rather stay in your own home, So...
Yeah, look, I can vouch for that firsthand from my mother, who is very determined to stay in her own home, but she's very happy there at the moment. So that's the main thing. What are some of the more fulfilling parts of your role working in aged care?
The fulfilling part of the role is on both sides. From being with a social, I can see the transitions from working with a private company to a social organisation. So the dynamics are different. I mean, even with back care, we have a pastoral side, so there's that spiritual connection, which brings a different element. We have mindfulness, meditation. So from that company side, but then from the client side, it's a reward. You're helping people. You're helping people in their life, and they're appreciative because they want to remain home. They don't want to, a lot of these people have serious health issues, and they might be going in and out of hospital. If you can come in and, make a difference to their day, or, it's from you, it's a business interaction, but it's also a human interaction, is how you can help that person and have a bit of fun too.
Yeah.
Have a bit of fun and a bit of joy, make it light, bright and breezy sometimes instead of always serious. So it's a really enjoyable dynamic, the care industry.
What sort of personality types do you think thrive in that industry, Thena?
It's an interesting question because, I really notice the different types of personality. Some people, it's just a job. They're there, and it might be just while they're studying to be a nurse, then they're going into the hospital. So really, people at different career stages too, but if it's a long term, it's that real, if you're empathetic, you can be introverted or extroverted, but I think the personality traits, it's conscious, because you're in a caring environment, so you want to be aware, caring, agreeable, open, personality traits that, relate to people. You're in the people, you know what, it's a service industry and it's people industry. So if you enjoy being with people, it's a rewarding industry.
Yeah. What advice would you have for someone who is perhaps thinking about going through a career change and exploring options within aged care?
Definitely try some voluntary work or local community work. Connect with your local councils. Or meet, or even, if you can engage with someone, find out different roles that resonate with you, connect with someone, have a chat to them, ask them, or even on LinkedIn, connect with them, ask them questions about the role, about the companies, the difference between private to your social, like your back care or your not-for-profit. But don't be afraid of change. If it's the right time, start doing the investigations. To see if, does it really resonate, or is it just going to be something that you might want to volunteer as a hobby but not as a career. So that could be something for people. It might just be something that you fulfill on a part-time level as opposed to a full-time level. Because it is a different dynamics depending on what industry you're coming from. But don't be afraid to take that risk. You're worth the investment. You're worth the change. And so, change, it's that journey, that learning, that outcome, and looking back and reflecting and going, wow, I did it,
You did.
So, I think I'm one of those people, I thrive in, I like to change. I really, it's not change that is my fear. It's my fear if I'm going to be successful or not with it. So what my goal is, will I reach the goal within that industry or, at the same time? But in terms of aged care, it's a rewarding industry.
That's great to hear, Thena, and I'm sure you will just go on to do bigger and better things with your, with your study now, and you've got your foot in the door well and truly now after 3 and a bit years. So, look, thank you for joining me. It's been, an absolute pleasure to chat to you, and you've provided us with a wealth of information about the industry. So, I really appreciate you coming on the show and wish you the best for the rest of the year.
Thanks, Lee. I've enjoyed our time too. I look forward to the next catch-up.
I hope you enjoyed this episode of Relaunch Your Career. If you did, please subscribe, share with your friends, leave a review, or connect with us on social media at Relaunch Me Career Consulting. If you have any questions about the episode or the work that we do, then contact us via the website relaunchme.com.au. Thanks for listening. Have a great day.